We're back with another episode of Interjections. IJ Subito bringing you the I with Irfan and the J from J Subito, or whatever this amended short version is called. A first ever mano a mano combination between Korea and Pakistan and Australia and the United States. Today, we're going to start off by talking about the absolute state of the dating game, the online dating game. I am quite a traditionalist when it comes to social media and dating. I mean, I obviously have Instagram for the hers, but I don't really use Facebook and never use dating apps. But all that changed when I went to Korea for a recent trip, having just come back. And let me tell you what, it's fucking depressing, man, to go from just baddie after baddie after baddie to having like a 99% no swiping left rate as soon as my plane touched down back in Sydney. So here to talk about the game is Irfan. Irfan, how have you been?
Good, as someone who's been married for 13 years and has three kids, I feel very well positioned to talk about dating apps, of which I've never ever been on one. So, yeah, but you know what? It doesn't sound that crazy to me the way you described it, because that's kind of how I imagined it always went. It must be sort of frustrating and sort of weird. Like, I think a lot of people, I don't know, if do people still go out to like clubs and bars anymore? I don't know, maybe they do, but it's kind of just like that whole scene, but like in hyperdrive, right? Because you just essentially focus on the most shallow elements of a person and you blast it on a screen, and then you kind of swipe to see if you like that person and if they like you. So sounds extremely sordid, but I don't know. I guess in a way, I'm glad I'm out of it. I don't think I would have been very successful in that environment, but props to you for sticking it out and going through with it.
Speaking of successful in an environment, let's bring the conversation back to Inter. I'll be honest with you, I have absolutely no idea what we're going to talk about. I have made zero planning about the contents of today's episode, but I did want to track back quickly to these lookman rumors that have obviously surfaced in the past 2 weeks or so, and that the boys discussed in last week's episode. I will admit, I finally managed to listen to the episode on my third attempt, and I agree with many of the takes. But I'm glad I have you here, Irfan, because I kind of agree with your take the most, which is that it feels like another random and unneeded luxury purchase in a way when you consider the gaping holes elsewhere. And it feels like a lot of money to be spent when, when there are so many other priorities that need addressing. And I'm going to give an example in particular. We've got this issue at centre back with trying to sign Leone. We've got this issue in central midfield, in my opinion, with the lack of a bona fide star. And forward is the only compartment or department where we have two big names where we are largely set. Now, does that mean we shouldn't have a third starting caliber forward? No, absolutely not. But I do feel spending 25 million on Bonnie only to then go and spend 45 to 50 million on Lookman is a bit of a strange strategy. You've bought what is essentially an extremely expensive backup player in Bonnie, and kind of made him redundant immediately by signing Lookman. So, what do you think about this? What do you think about this Lookman deal as it currently stands? And confusingly, it seems there hasn't been much movement for a few days.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm disappointed that Andrew and Miko aren't here. They're basically like part-time members now at this point, which is what they said about me, which I did hear because I do listen to the podcast, even though there's been accusations that I don't listen. But no, I think what you said is exactly how I feel, which is it's this collection with Oak Tree in charge. There's been this like just collection of rumors and then actual purchases that like leave you scratching your head, right? We were just like, why did we sign Buchanan? Why did we sign Palacios? Why did we spend so much money on Martinez when we had just basically gotten Summer? And like, look, for a regular way, well financed, well managed, consistent sort of club, projecting out and getting some redundancies at each position make a lot of sense. But for a club like us, where everything's sort of still up in the air, things are still a little chaotic, and then you do, like you mentioned, have gaping holes in certain positions. Which, by the way, gaping holes is just like such a hilarious term. So it just seems a little weird that you would go out and spend 25 million on Bonnie, which I think a lot of people, a lot of Inter fans randomly forget that we signed this guy, and that we not only did we sign him, but we signed him for $25 million, and then you're spending 45 to 50 million, which we didn't even know we had, um, and apparently we don't have for any other positions. Um, Really weird. The other thing that really strikes me about this is just the lack of inventiveness again in our transfer strategy, right? Like for the last week or so, we've basically been hearing about how Leone is still the target, but Parma want too much money for him, and then Lookman, we're negotiating. Well, we're at 40. Oh, we've gone up to 45. Oh, Atlanta only want 50. We keep hearing these things. It's like, why is there, you might see like De Winter's name and some other random names come up, but for the most part, everything seems to be locked into like the same names. And they're all like, these Serie A targets, either some really young guy in Serie A or they're like some, well-established player that we're very like obviously underbidding for. But there's just no inventiveness. Like where like the creativity in names coming for our center back? Like we clearly need a center back. And even if they think Leone costs too much money, like where are the other names? And for the Lookman one, I think the boys talked about it, like you said. Like it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't understand tactically how it's supposed to work. When you get someone like him, he's going to want to start or at least be on the pitch quite a bit. And I don't really know how you can do that and maintain any sort of balance. And again, last year, for the most part, like we did have issues with our backup forwards, but for the most part, the team scored a lot of goals. I mean, I think we led the league in goals scored again. And so last year's issues seemed to me to be a lot more defensive than they were offensive. And so while I'm all about strengthening the forward position, I don't think we need heavy capital expenditures like $45 million in the forward department. I think it needs to be spent more carefully in the midfield and in the defense.
Yeah, and can I just say the whole thing about Leone is confusing to begin with in the fact that the guy is 18 and he realistically can't and shouldn't be trusted or burdened with leading our defense. And at the same time, you generally don't invest so heavily in such a talent if you aren't going to thrust that burden on him anyway. So it feels precarious, you know. Let's say we sign Leone for 40 million or whatever they're asking for. And I mean, firstly, is Kivu going to start him? Is he going to play him equally or more than the likes of Acerbi and DeFry? Because they're both still here. Let's not forget, both still here, both still earning large salaries. But you know, it just stinks to me. It just stinks. I feel like buying prospects is all well and good, but the prioritization of prospect versus current contributor or incoming star is very off with Oak Tree. And this recent transfer strategy of ours, we've spent a lot of money on players like on Bonnie, and you throw in the money for Palacios and Luis Enrique as well. These are not small amounts of money that we spent on players who are uh, ostensibly for the future. But given the way this team is otherwise set up with so many veterans, do we trust that they'll have the space to develop, the patience to develop, or are we taking a step back in our sporting goals? What's going on here, and how does Lookman fit into all this as well?
Yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And then I'm glad you mentioned the oak tree thing and some of the other signings we've had. So, when you have someone like Buchanan, Henrique, Sucic, even Bonnie, that shows to me a pretty steady track record of Oak Tree's philosophy when it comes to signing, right? Like they seem to go after these under 23, under 24 players, and they want to kind of reinvigorate the youth in the squad. And for a long time, I think they had some issues with Inzaghi. I mean, I don't think they were like beefing about it, but I think their transfer strategy didn't necessarily match the on the pitch philosophy and strategy of the manager. We don't know if that's going to be the case with Kivu. It does seem like he will play younger people more than Inzaghi used to play. But what I don't understand then is if you have a track record of spending money on these younger players that you're kind of hoping boom, how does a 45 million to 50 million on a 28-year-old forward play into that? It just seems like such an uncharacteristic Oak Tree signing that it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's why, to me, the Lookman stuff never passed the smell test. And I don't want to get into like Jeffrey Epstein level conspiracies here. Well, actually, that's not even a conspiracy. So, like, get into like actual conspiracies here. But to me, it always seems like if we're signing Lookman and we're like that committed to spending 45 to 50 million for him, it seems like it's because we're trying to like offload a forward, most likely Taram, because Lautaro's not going to go anywhere. So to me, it just, again, it doesn't pass the smell test. Given the way Oak Tree is operated, this would be just such an aberration of a signing that it doesn't make sense. And again, notice neither of us have said we don't think Lookman is good or that his skill set wouldn't be valued or that on the pitch he wouldn't perform. I don't think that's really the question. The question is when you look at these rumors in the context of the way this team tends to operate, it doesn't just make a lot of sense. Like something kind of stinks about it, and I don't know what it is.
This is going to completely contradict everything I've just said up until now, but you know what we should have done instead of spending a combined 50 million on Lookman and Bonnie is we should have just got Griezmann on a free transfer.
Yeah, yeah,
Even
yeah.
though
Again,
he's
I mean,
34 years old and expensive as fuck. This is like, there are levels to this, and I think Griezmann would have been a perfect candidate for a free agency.
yeah, I mean, I think you do need a mix of certain types of players, right? Like, again, if you're getting a older creative, proven, but sort of declining player, like let's say like an Alexis Sanchez, right? Like they're going to have some frustrations about not playing all the time, but they're going to be a lot more likely to take a more part-time or sort of backseat role than someone who's 28, frustrated with their current team, and wants to prove something, and thinks that they're in their prime, which they probably are. And so that's the other thing with this strategy, right? Like, and then when you go to center back, it's the same sort of thing. Like you've got a 37 and a 34-year-old center back, and instead of trying to like find somebody who's like 23, 24, 25, maybe even 26, or going for somebody who's not well situated in whatever position they're in, and even if they're like 28 or 29, instead of doing something like that, you're going for an 18-year-old kid who is a solid prospect, is a great player by all accounts. But not only do you not know what you're going to get, but you don't know if you can plug him in immediately for him to start playing. And then you also might have to leave it. Like some rumor I saw was like you might leave him out on loan for a year, or like some of the other clubs that are now coming into the fray to bid on him, or like telling Parma that like, oh, he can stay for a year, kind of like what we did with Bastoni. So again, like these transactions don't really make sense with the way the team has typically operated, and that always just seems suspect to me. And again, like you look at Lookman, the boys talked about it last week, and by then it was already at least a few days, if not a week old. So now we're sitting here on basically 2 weeks, and like there's been little to no progress on it. So I just can't help but think that it's not really going to happen, and it just seems like a really random rumor. Again, unless we're unloading some forward that we don't know about, and that forward can't be Taremi because no one really cares about him.
I forgot about the Iranian the Iranian Michael Jordan. Uh,
It's just such a weird situation. One thing though that I'm sure our fans have just been reading recently and are just incensed about is that supposedly there's like a 15 million, and literally that's been the number, a $15 million deal agreed for Aslani with Real Betis, and he just refuses to go because he doesn't want to leave Italy. So you can imagine the sort of reaction among Inter fans when they hear news like that. Which again, we don't even know if that news is true, but
Imagine, I'm feeling it right now.
yeah, that's hilarious.
There's ain't no imagining going on here. It's all real. It's all vivid, and when it comes to, I'll make up my mind on what rumors I'll choose to believe without any evidence, and and this is one of them.
Yeah, it's just such a good fitting rumor for the outrage machine. It's just perfect. But the other thing, speaking of Asllani, the other thing that doesn't make a lot of sense to me is if you end up signing Lookman, like let's say you actually do spend 45 to 50 million on him, all of my conspiracy theories about selling Taram are not actually true, and our forward department is like just stacked going into the season. That's great. If we play some sort of formation where we have essentially two midfielders, which is what it's been rumored for us to be playing, and one of those midfielders obviously is going to be Barella, and then the other one, seems to be some sort of out of sorts Hakan. I still think you need some sort of solid midfielder, whether it's like a defensive midfielder or ball winning midfielder or some sort of midfielder to complement that bunch. Because if you sell Aslani, then you have Hakan Barella and I guess Sucic, which is kind of an unknown player at this point. And then all your other midfielders are very ill suited to play in a two-man midfield where you're expected to do a lot of defensive work. Like you can't put Mkhitaryan there, and besides, he would play in a more advanced role in that formation. And then Fratesi, you're really going to put Fratesi there? Zelensky, who's always injured and unreliable whenever you need him. So it also creates, I think, a lot of urgency to find an answer in midfield. And I don't think we've even been linked with anyone. I think there was that friend up rumor that the guys talked about, but that seems to have dried up. So I don't know what's going on with our midfield plans. And are you buying this whole Hakan and Lautaro have kissed and made up? Are you buying this?
I mean, they did put out a story on Instagram with the two of them sitting next to each other and smiling and looking like they're palling around. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what to make of the whole thing, to be honest. I mean, on one hand, I if we take it back a step and kind of go back to Lataro's original comments, I I do see or I do believe that they were a bit poorly timed or ill advised to just kind of have an outburst like that. And then I was equally perplexed by Marotta naming Çalhanoğlu just directly like some kind of bitch. You know what I mean? Like that was some mad bitch shit from Marotta. That was the ultimate snitching.
Yeah.
Public just he was talking about Hakan Çalhanoğlu straight up like that. That was just bizarre. And then Çalhanoğlu comes out and posts some dramatic, you know, photoshopped Insta post with a collage of himself in intercolors, applauding the fans, denying all the allegations and everything, and then saying it was and basically hitting back at Lautaro, saying that a real leader should unite and not, uh, not separate. So the whole thing was just fucking bizarre, to be honest. And I kind of think some of it was probably, at least from Lautaro, a lot of the frustrations might have been born from the way Inzaghi left. And I don't know. Well, I don't really think that there were many signs from Hakan prior to the whole Galatasaray thing that he wanted to leave. I don't recall seeing many rumors about his departure in the last year or so. I remember there was briefly something about him or some interest from Bayern Munich, but other than that, it felt like all the Galatasaray rumors kind of started after this spat with Lautaro, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, look, the whole situation was bizarre, so it kind of left me with just kind of left me in a daze. I don't know what to make of it. I know equally less of what to make of this making up between the two players. I hope that whatever animosity is there or was there has been squashed, that they can just get back to playing football, because I feel like uh, I feel like it's been a while since we've been playing football kind of free from the burden or from the stress of the weight of, the expectation of winning. And well, we all know how that went.
And it's interesting, Jay. I feel like you're a corporate bigwig, who manages people, and you'll understand this, I think, better than a lot of our Inter fans who are probably pimple faced teenagers or unemployed slumlords of some sort. But whenever something as traumatic as a 5-0 happens on the biggest world stage, and your manager essentially quits and just like leaves, in very unceremonious ways, and a manager that you've been close to, um, it's natural for you to sort of question, like, what the hell's going on? Like, it creates this like period of uncertainty, right? Like, I've been, at firms and other places where someone I've worked with a lot, someone who is like, quote unquote, my manager or a big part of my work life, decides to leave and goes to another firm. There's this real tangible sort of, unknown out there in your workspace, and you're just kind of concerned about like what the future holds. And it makes you sort of think about, you might have been completely secure in your position, but it makes you sort of start to think about like, okay, what does this mean? Like, what's going on? And how did this person just leave? And what does this mean for me? Like, I was like one of the first names on this guy's sheet all the time. Like, now my work is going to be coming from somebody else, and what if it dries up, or what if someone else is preferred over me, or like, just it just creates this period of uncertainty and unknown. And it's perfectly natural for these players to react in the same way. Like, sometimes I feel like we hold these guys to some crazy standard. I mean, they're still sort of professionals working a job, and it's natural for there to be some sort of uncertainty and, period of distress when something like this happens. And Lataro's comments to me seemed geared a lot more, like you said, towards Inzaghi leaving and him kind of questioning Inzaghi's desire to be at Inter, even, towards the stretch before the Champions League final. And then, yeah, maybe some of the players. But to me, the lash out was a lot more a result of somebody who was standing on the pitch, getting humiliated, in the Champions League final without much to say at all, because none of the ball couldn't make it past the midfield to him. And so he's just sitting there frustrated and watching this midfield just get completely like just owned. And then you go to this like pissant tournament in the US and you're playing all these teams, and and then you have a new manager who's experimenting with like players and formations. He's out there, with Aslani pulling the strings and Pio Esposito next to him. And other than Barella and I don't know who else, like no one else really played on the Inter team like a traditional sort of starter. And Thuram's just sort of injured and checked out. Like, it's a player who was like clearly very frustrated, had a bunch of very a bunch of like disappointing emotions built up for a long time, and then he lashed out. And I think it is funny that it was Morata who just kind of poured gas on the fire by starting to like really lean into this. Like the club should have just summarily dismissed it and been like, we get the frustration. It's been a rough couple of months. We're going to retool and we're going to talk to the players and we're going to be ready for the next season. Instead, homeboy goes out there and is like, yeah, Hakan like kind of sucks. And what are we doing here? How did it get to that point? And I think there was a lot more going on there than just like a Lautaro doesn't like Hakan sort of situation. But still, it's such a bizarre. It's the last few months, like if you really scale out, have just been so bizarre for this club. I can't really put my finger on, and like I see no stability going forward, which is what worries me a lot for this next season. Like there's so many unknowns. Like we're entering a period of uncertainty, I think, with Inter that we haven't had since probably before, maybe even before the Spalletti days. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think everything you said is just spot on. And I'll tell you what, I'm a big believer that the I always say this, that Inter is one of these weird clubs that just exists in a state of like Schrodinger's cat. Basically, is in a constant state of being normal and fucked at the same time, and you don't know what state it's in until you open the box. And no other club lives with the sword of Damocles hanging above its head at any given time like Inter does. No other club can go from being on the precipice of a treble to going to like whatever this is, just like some hard atomic nuclear reset, going from, you know, a manager who put them into a state of competing for two Champions Leagues in the span of 3 years, winning the title once and coming second twice. And, you know, that, like I said last time, that's kind of like, again, don't take this the wrong way, but I think you understand when I say that's the kind of competition level that you expect the elite of the elite clubs to be at. The Real Madrid, the Barcelona, the Man Cities, PSGs of the world. If you said, oh, Man City, won the league once in the last 3 years and came narrowly second twice, and they also made it to two Champions League finals. Like, fuck, what's better than that? Winning a Champions League, winning the league once more? You can't really expect much more than that. But to go from that to suddenly hiring some rank amateur who has 3 career wins in his life is just like the most bizarre turn of events that one could possibly dream of. And it's almost like something out of a fever dream, but this is reality. And as you said, the last few months have been just a blur for Inter. The departures, the manners in which they happen, the arrivals have all been so strange, to put it lightly. Let me shift focus a little bit here. So, as I understand it, we're now, or preseason started officially yesterday. All the players came back, and we started seeing the usual photos of them arriving from vacation, thumbs up to the camera. Some of them looking a tiny bit fat, some of them looking tanned, but otherwise everyone's back at Appiano Gentile now. You guys spoke about or not you guys, but the guys last week spoke about the shift from Inzaghi's 3-5-2 to Kivu's 3-4-2-1. I wanted to ask you, Irfan, is it too early to expect any other tactical changes from Kivu compared to what we've seen from Inzaghi? Is there anything in particular that you're going, or that you've seen during the preseason and you go, okay, this is something I'm looking forward to seeing Kivu really work on, or this is something I've caught on to as something Kivu has been pushing?
Yeah, two things come to mind. The formation stuff is definitely interesting, right? If we could go to a 3-4-2-1 or even some sort of like a 3-4-3 instead of the standard sort of 3-5-2. It does create, like I talked about a little bit, a lot of uncertainty for me when it comes to our midfield. I don't feel like we have the personnel or depth to pull off a 3-2. Sorry, a 3-2, 3-1. What is it? Three
Three, four,
two.
two,
Yeah.
one.
3-4-2-1. I don't feel like we have the midfield formation to pull off a 3-4-2-1. But that's a different issue that we've already talked about. When it comes to Kivu, there's two things that I thought were interesting watching his limited sort of experience with Inter in that U.S. tournament. One was he does seem more inclined to play younger players. Now, that might have just been because the older players were tired as shit and probably not mentally in a great space. And I don't think people really cared too much about this tournament, within reason. And so he seemed more inclined to play and trust young players than Inzaghi ever did, which I think could be a good thing for sure. So that's one thing that's a little bit more, I think, promising when it comes to Kivu. When it comes to his like decisions to play certain players, though I still fully expect to see Mkhitaryan playing twice a week for 90 minutes, just because we don't have any other sort of player who seems to be able to have that sort of skill set consistently. That aside, the other thing that I think was interesting watching him in his limited experience with Inter was he's definitely a lot more direct. Our play was a lot more direct than it was under Inzaghi. Some of that Inzaghi, like, let's move the ball around in the back for like 5 minutes to set up the sort of tactical push that we want to set up in the attacking phase, seemed to go away with Kivu. It was a lot more, all right, you see a forward, launch it to the forward. Or, you see a winger running, like just throw just kick the ball to the winger and see what happens. Like it was definitely a lot more direct and a little bit less patient, which again, I don't think is a bad thing. We've all seen those beautiful sort of Inzaghi style setups that result in like 15 passes and then, you know, bringing the opposition forward and then lulling them back and then bringing them forward and then finally like hitting them. So like that stuff is beautiful to watch, no doubt. But at times it's also frustrating because you need a goal or you want to be more direct to take advantage of situations more quickly. So I expect that the tempo might increase under Kivu, but it's interesting to see what ends up happening. And the one thing that we don't really know is there's still a lot of unknowns before the season starts because, again, like we signed Bonnie, but we never saw him play. And Sucic made some appearances, and Pio Esposito looked pretty good. Henrique had a bit of a mixed bag, but there's a lot of new sort of personnel that hasn't really been brought up to speed yet, and we don't know what they're going to look like. So that area to me is also like a very sort of interesting and unknown place to be. So, and if we sign Lookman, like who knows, like what that looks like too. So those are the things that I'm interested to see. But I do like that he seems to have a little bit more faith in playing young players than Inzaghi did, and tactically, we do seem to be a little bit more quick and direct than we were under Inzaghi. But let's see. What about you? What are your kind of thoughts, or what do you think we might see under Kivu?
Yeah, I. It's hard to say. I didn't watch much of the preseason, to be honest with you, so I have less insights into, I guess, what little in-game footage we do have under Kivu. But I do think the intention is for there to be a bit more involvement in the final third before leading to a shot on goal, whereas Inzaghi's football was incredibly direct once we flip the switch. As you said, there's a lot of kind of highlight reels out there of us playing the ball around, luring opponents into a press, and then uh, kind of moving the ball very vertically, very quickly through a few incisive passes, and then usually just doing like a kind of route 1-2 kind of thing, going out to the wing, crossing it across the face of the goal, and then tapping it in. Um, I feel like there'll be a bit more passing, a bit more dribbling, a bit more emphasis on creativity in the middle of the park as well. Now that we have a 3-4-2-1 system, and I think the intention is for these players to take on a lot of the creative burden rather than just the wing backs and the midfielders comparatively. Um, but I think it does heavily hinge on our ability to sign Lookman, for example, because without him, I don't know if there really is a 3-4-2-1. Like, who are you going to play? Like, Fratesi and Turam or something? That's pretty fucking uninspiring, isn't it? So I do think, yeah, a lot of it hinges on the ability for us to sign Lookman. Speaking of which, let us end this 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 episode by kind of wrapping up on, I guess, what we're expecting from the two big names that we're linked to currently. Firstly, Lookman, are we getting this deal done? Will we eventually sign him? Yes or no? And likewise for Leone, will this deal get done? Yes or no? And if so, why? What gives you confidence? And if not, why not? Why do you think, or where do you think the deal will fall through?
Yeah, you're already starting to see rumors of Leone flirting with other players, with other teams like Juventus and Milan. So I actually don't think we're going to sign Leone. I think Parma's valuation of him is too high. I think he'll end up going to a different Italian team, or I think he'll just stay at Parma for another year. So that's Leone. Lookman, it's still to me 50-50. Like, by all accounts, it seems like we're getting close on price and we're willing to move up to meet Atalanta's demands to an extent. But given Oak Tree's record and given where we are, I still just don't think the signing makes any sense. So I don't think we're going to end up signing him. So I'm actually out on both of them. What about you?
So did you say you don't think we'll sign either of them?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think we'll sign either of them.
Even Lookman?
Even Lookman. I just the whole transfer just doesn't make any sense to me from the start, and it hasn't progressed much in 2 weeks, unless it's now just a game of attrition to see who kind of breaks first at this point, and the price is what it is. I don't know. I don't feel like we're going to sign either of them. I think we'll have to pivot at some point. You'll see some other names.
Man, I mean, I can totally see us eventually caving and paying right now it seems like we're at 45 million for Lookman, but Atalanta holding out for 50, and I think it'll be only a matter of time before we cough up the remaining 5 million in some way, shape, or form. Probably in the form of slightly increased starting offer, and then like 1 or 2 million in bonuses, whatever. As for Leone, I don't know what to think. I mean, we keep hearing for both players that the priority is to join Inter, but we all know how fickle those words ring true when push comes to shove. And as you said, he's being courted by other Italian teams, especially Juventus these days, it seems. And you're right, the valuation is simply too high. Now, I would be much more confident in a Leone deal materializing if the player himself was a few years older. Uh, that would give me some more confidence that the coach would be both able and willing to rely on him as a as a bona fide starter for the defense. But at Inter, playing in the Champions League, even with the new coach and even in this kind of reset mode, there's still an expectation that the bottom doesn't fall out. I guess, I mean, it's hard to really to assess at this stage and not to get off track. But where do people think we're going to finish this season? Like, what's our expectations given the reset? I mean, on one hand, given where we've been in the last 5 years, like I was talking about previously, couple of Scudetti, couple of close second places, Coppa Italia, Super Coppa, Champions League runners up, etc., etc. You have to say the expectation is like Coppa Italia semi-final, Champions League quarterfinal, and top three, top four in Serie A, wouldn't you think? Given where we've been, but then when you take into consideration the fact that we've got like a complete unknown as our coach, and we're buying more largely unknown players, with the exception of Lookman, it really could kind of go either way. So, with those expectations in consideration, I do think Leone being so young just adds even more murkiness to this already very murky water. And like I said, had Leone been 21 or even 23 years old, I think it'd be a different story. And I think we'd be more decisive in going to get him. But I do think the the demands for such a young player makes it even more difficult for us to take that risk because, like I said, he's just so young that the coach might not be able to trust him at that stage. So I'm going to give the Leone deal a 60-40 chance of it not happening and a 40% chance that we'll get over the line. As for Lookman, yeah, I do think it'll eventually happen. We're just too close for it to not happen. But yeah, Leone, I'm not quite sure.
I keep hoping, in the words of the great Lil Wayne, real G's move in silence like lasagna. I keep hoping that there's like some secret negotiations and deals going on with names that we haven't been, privy to yet. I'm hoping there's a couple of other names out there for these positions, including for a midfield position, that will be linked to late, and the deal will get executed quickly. And we just haven't heard about it yet because so much of the news has been on Leone and Lookman. Do I think that's actually going to happen? No. Do I hope that it's happening? Yes, because honestly, like to me, Lookman, I like Leone a lot. I think he's going to be a really, really, really good player, probably starting center defender for Italy, later in his career. But from where we are right now and for the cost, I just don't think it makes a lot of sense. And Lookman, I've already spoken on a lot. So I just hope that there's some other business going on and we're considering at least other names. And even if we do end up with Lookman, which I think, if we end up with him, like I'll embrace it. I'll welcome it. But I do hope that there's at least some other names we're pursuing and we just haven't heard about it yet because otherwise this all seems a little uninspiring to me. So I guess we'll see.
All right. And with that, we will end today's episode. I just want to, again, shout out the baddies in South Korea while uh, while remonstrating and just despairing at the assault that my eyes had to endure the second my plane hit the tarmac of Sydney Airport. It was it was like going from Rivendell to Mordor. It was like
Oh
I
no.
just I just don't know what to say. It was like going from the precipice of a treble to getting 5-0 by PSG. Something
Oh man.
yeah, I instantly put my profile on invisible mode because I was like, I don't want any part of this shit any longer.
Yeah, see that uncertainty that comes with with the 5-0 defeat, it lingers with you for a while. It stays there. But you know what? In the words of the great Miko, Forza Inter.
That's right. Forza Inter, Forza baddies, and see you next time.
See ya.